Everyone knows that having a high saddle means it's going to feel a bit easier to pedal, and having a low saddle means it's going to feel a bit safer off-road. But there's a lot more to setting up your saddle position that you might be aware of. Things like your cranks, your pedals, the shoes that you ride in, and even the handlebars all make a significant difference to how comfortable you are when you're sat in your saddle. So let's take a look at all of those things so you can get the most comfortable position for you. Okay, so although we're going to be focusing on getting your saddle the correct height, moving it backwards and forwards on the rails, and looking at the correct angle to suit your riding, we're also going to be looking at your other contact points. That means your handlebars, your stem, even your grips, and also the cranks and the pedals on your bike. The relationship of these three contact areas on your bike actually plays a huge part in your comfort. But don't worry, it's not that complicated. It's just so you can pinpoint any issues if you do have them when you're out riding on the trail. So first up, let's get that saddle height nailed. Okay, so the classic method for getting your saddle the correct height is based around maximum efficiency, getting all of the power from your legs. You think your legs are just big mechanical levers and they've got joints. If you're on your saddle too high, you could strain a joint. Likewise, if you go too low, it could just be a bit hard. It's not the best pedaling angle. So starting with your shoes first. Now, if you have any sort of cycling shoes, put those on. If not, put on the sort of shoes that you're likely to ride your bike in. Now, this is quite important because of the fact that the thickness of the sole ultimately affects how high you're going to run your saddle. Next up, get yourself a set of Allen keys, or if your bike's got a quick release, you'll be fine with that. This one's a 4mm on here, by the way. Yours might be a 4, 5, or a 6. They're the common options available. Next up, get yourself in a place where you can lean up against something. Could be the garden against a fence, it could be against a tree, kitchen worktop, or if you've got a workbench. Alternatively, get someone else to help you basically at this point. Now, sling a leg over your bike. Now, before you make any adjustments, what I want you to do is pedal backwards until your favourite foot is at the lowest part of the stroke. Then I want you to put your heel on that pedal. Now, what you're looking for here is to get your leg completely locked out. Now, adjust the saddle or adjust your seat post height until your leg is locked out. Now, clearly, you're not going to pedal in this position and you don't want your legs to be locked out when you're pedaling. What this does, though, is enables your leg to be at the optimum angle when you actually put the ball of your foot over the pedal axle. And the optimum angle is about a 30-degree bend in your leg. Now, that gives you the best use of your leg muscles and the minimum pressure put through your joints. After all, the bike is supposed to be one of the most efficient machines. Essentially, that is how you set the correct saddle height. However, there's more factors involved on a mountain bike. On a road bike, of course, when you're not changing position so frequently, it's vital to get your saddle in the perfect position. That's fore and aft as well as up and down, and then the pedal dynamics go into that as well. The reason for that is the fact that you're doing so many miles in the same position. And if you've got any of those elements wrong, it could put strain on your knees, your ankles, your hips, even your back. There's lots of different effects you can get. On mountain bikes though, we change our position quite a lot. Even when seated, we move forwards and backwards on the saddle a lot, whether it's climbing a steep face and you need to weight that front wheel, or you're just moving around on the saddle over bumpy terrain you're pedaling along. So for that basis, the next thing I want you to do is to lower your saddle slightly. Yep, that's right, lower it. We're talking between 1 and 3 centimeters here, nothing too crazy. Now let's just assume you haven't got a dropper seat post. If you did, you could just lower it whenever you need to, but if you haven't, when you're riding in an off-road environment and you've got your saddle at that full efficient height, if you're riding on chattery, bumpy, rough terrain, you're trying to pedal, it can be really off-putting and quite hard as the saddle's constantly kicking you up the back there as you're trying to spin those smooth circles to get that power down. If you lower your saddle very slightly, that's all it's going to take, between 1 and 3 centimeters. It just enables you to use the power in your legs as you're pedaling to just momentarily lift yourself away from the saddle as you feel those bumps. It's a really good technique to use, and you see a lot of cross-country racers having that technique. As an upside, another thing it enables you to do is to make the transition from seated to stood up and back much, much faster and much smoother. It can be a little bit awkward when you try and get back on a full efficient height saddle. Of course though, there is one slight downside. You're going to lose a tiny bit of power, so just experiment with it. But like I said, between 1 and 3 centimeters, and you lower than that, then your legs are going to start working quite a lot harder. So just take that into account. So just like getting your saddle at the optimum height, there is also a method for getting your saddle forwards and backwards on the rails in the most comfortable and the most effective position for pedaling. So get yourself back in the saddle. Now sit with your cranks in the horizontal position with your right foot forwards. Now what you're looking for here is a vertical line when you draw an imaginary line or a plumb line over the front of your kneecap and then running down through the axle of the pedal. Now you can adjust your saddle fore and aft on those rails accordingly to get to that, and most saddle rails do have some kind of marking system on them for your reference. So you can obviously move them 2 or 3 millimeters at a time, and that can make quite a big difference. So that's going to get you in the best position for getting power down. However, on a mountain bike, there are some different factors to this. Ultimately, as well as getting power down and making sure your limbs aren't under any sort of stress, what you're looking for is ultimate performance. That means being able to weight the rear wheel for traction, also weight the front wheel so you've got control. It's all about the dynamics of your position on the bike. If you're too far rearwards when this is correct, then you might actually want to run your saddle slightly forwards just to help you get the weight back on that front wheel. And likewise, if you're excessively tall, or perhaps if your bike has a very shallow or a slack seat angle on it, the higher the seat is, the further away and the nearer over the rear wheel axle it's going to get. Accordingly, you're going to need to move the saddle forwards to return that position. Now this is a rule of thumb. It's a great place to start with, and I suggest doing this to get your saddle in a good base place. Now of course there are going to be different settings and different bikes and different geometry that are going to affect this. Just for example, if your bike has a very slack seat angle, the higher your saddle is, the further out it's going to get. Now you might have to excessively put your saddle forwards to get anywhere near that optimum position, but just use that as a good place to start. The last major part of your saddle position is getting the angle correct. Now this is really important because it can lead to discomfort if you get it wrong. Now if you run your saddle nose down, a lot of the time if you're riding on the flat, you're not going to be able to get enough weight on that saddle. And what happens then is you end up transferring a large part of your body weight forwards, so your wrists are going to get that. So if you've got sore wrists, it could well be because of the fact your saddle angle is nose down. Now also, if you run your saddle with a nose up angle on it, that's also going to create its own different set of problems. It can create pressure on your undercarriage areas, which in the short term is going to be uncomfortable, but in the long term it can lead to numbness, and in extreme cases it can lead to medical conditions. So do make sure that you spend the time to get your saddle at a good angle. Now the type of riding you're doing as well will also affect how you're going to have your saddle angle. On a cross-country bike like this one, fairly flat is a good place to start. The predominant part of your riding will be flat, maybe slightly uphill, so you want to compensate for that by having a saddle. In fact, mine's slightly nose down, not much, just enough to make those climbs comfortable and not take away from the power I can get down on the flat sections. But if you look at my nuke proof here, you'll see that the saddle is quite nose down. Now the type of riding I tend to do on that is up much steeper climbs, often technical, where I really need to get forwards on the bike. I don't tend to ride it around too much, it tends to be up and down, whereas a cross-country bike is up, down, along and over. So accordingly the saddle needs to be in a flatter position, so make sure you do take that into account. Okay, so you've got your saddle height and you've got the position dialed in, at least to a good base setting. But there are some other factors that can affect your comfort, and they can be quite tricky to figure out exactly what they are. And one of them is the crank length on your bike. Now, if you're on a road bike, this makes a massive effect because it's all about the body geometry. But like I was explaining with your saddle position, it's less of an issue on a mountain bike because you're changing your position so frequently. However, there are still some anomalies that do make a bit of a difference to your discomfort or your comfort, more importantly, on a bike. Now, bike manufacturers do a pretty good job of speccing an appropriate length crank for the style and the size of bike. Just for example, this is a size extra large cross-country bike and it has a 175mm crank. I'm 6'3", so this is actually perfect for me. However, some people have different body geometry of their own. If you've got shorter legs, you might want to run a 170mm crank. And also there's other factors on mountain bikes too, because they're not just about spinning those cranks around. We've actually got to tackle the terrain that we're riding. My nuke-proof reactor, for example, has a much lower bottom bracket than this bike. It's designed to be ridden over quite aggressive terrain by comparison. So accordingly, even though it's the same size bike in an extra large, it comes with a 170mm crank. The reason for that is it has a bit more ground clearance. To be honest, I personally prefer a 175, but it does work okay on that bike. Now, crank length differences can make a difference to your comfort on a bike, but only really at the extreme end. If you've got shorter legs or longer legs and you're running either a shorter or a longer crank, it can cause discomfort, but it can be tricky to figure out what it is. So if there is a feeling you're getting your legs, maybe you feel like you're extending your legs too much, then almost certainly it will be your crank length. So just take that one into account. Okay, so going on with the theme of the cranks is your pedals. Now you get two main types of pedals. You get clipless pedals and you get flat pedals. Now let's start with the flat pedals. The biggest thing you're going to have to contend with here is if the pedal actually fits your foot. If you have exceptionally large feet and you're running quite a small pedal, you might find that the edge of your foot actually sits over the edge of the pedal, so that you can get cramp in your foot if you're running flat pedal shoes. But also this can lead to knee pain, and this can be hard to sort of determine that it's come from your pedals because of the fact that your saddle is normally the sort of suspect for that. Now just for example, if I just show you here, you've got two flat pedals. They're the same model of pedal and one is substantially bigger than the other. Now although they're recommended for different size feet, that is down to preference, but this is a good example of showing you that a bigger foot might not be suitable for using the smaller pedal. And of course, if you've got small feet, why have a massive pedal that does weigh a bit more and takes up the space when you can have one that fits your foot? So that is just a small thing to take into account. But let's take a look at clipless pedals next. Now, all right, so they're not directly involved with your saddle comfort, but because of the fact you're spending a lot of time pedaling, you're definitely going to feel discomfort through the saddle if you've not got this right. Now earlier on we told you about moving your saddle forwards and backwards by using that plumb line that runs around the front of your knee and down through that pedal axle. Now you've got to take into account, if you're running clipless pedals, you've got cleats on the bottom of your shoes. If you're going to run your cleats forwards or backwards, you need to correlate that with your saddle position. So whatever adjustments you make here, you need to compensate for that up top. Now something that can give you knee discomfort is if you've not got your cleats quite straight, or if you've got them overly in or outboard. Now of course we're all different, we all have different size feet, we all have slightly different stances, and they all have a different effect on how you set them up. No one person is the same. If you've got especially big feet, for example, you might find that you're rubbing your feet on the crank arms or on the chainstays of your bike. If that's the case, you'll need to mount the cleats as far inboard as possible to move your foot away from the crank. And if that's still not enough, you might need to consider axles with a bigger Q factor. Note how this axle here is slightly longer than the one on this side. I can't actually run the shorter axles because my feet rub on the crank arms. I always have to run the wider ones. It does make a big difference. But also by having your foot in a wider stance, if you've not got all of the other parts of the position right, you can be adding strain to the inside of your knees. And lastly, but definitely not least, is your cockpit position. That's right, everything you do at the front of the bike is directly going to affect your comfort on that saddle. If you're too stretched out, not only can it put too much pressure on your undercarriage, but it can also put loads of weight on your wrists, which can be really uncomfortable. You can also have the opposite effect if you're too cramped up. What I mean by cramped up is you're sitting upright, which means it can put undue pressure on your sit bones. What that's going to do, as well as just being slightly uncomfortable in the long term, is it's certainly going to show up if your saddle is not the right one for you. Of course, every saddle, every anatomy, we're all different, so it's really important to get these things right. Now Henry's made a video all about cockpit setup. The link to that is in the description underneath this. But just a few things just for you to sort of get your head around. If you have a wide bar, it's going to lower you down and stretch you out. If you have a narrow bar, it's going to bring you back up. The same goes for having a high bar or a low bar. With stem length, if you have a long stem, you're going to typically be more stretched out. If you have a short stem, you're going to be quite high up. So just think that everything you're going to do is going to have a slightly different effect on both your position at the front of the bike, but also how it feels when you're sat in that saddle. It's quite a lot to it than meets the eye. Well, there you go, that's everything you need to know about getting your saddle set up for performance and for comfort. Now, if you are struggling with the comfort side of things a bit, it's possible you're not on the right saddle. If that's the case, you should geek out, watch that video that's hanging around over there somewhere. It tells you everything about how saddles are made and why some of us find certain designs more comfortable than others. As always, if you've got any suggestions for more videos for us to make for you, let us know. We love your suggestions. See you later.